Good morning and welcome to our Deloitte's Business News webinar. And we're going to focus on sustaining public trust in government, the seamless service delivery as well. And these two topics come from a trends report that was compiled by Deloitte this past year. And we are going to look at how the government implemented the turnaround strategies, introduced technology in order to provide services, and whether that has enhanced the public trust in the government. And of course, there are many issues that relate to that, security issues and other concerns, that what if parts of the technology that's being deployed fail? What happens then? So we are here this morning. I've got 5 panelists to talk to us. I'll introduce them in a moment. And I also want to welcome you, the attendees, and I'm looking forward to your comments and questions. And for those who may have some experiences interacting with the government in this regard, I will welcome your own comments and questions in that regard. So let's get a bit of background on this matter from Mr. Khabar Tabane, who is going to talk to us about the report, as I said, that was compiled by Deloitte. And Khabar Tabane is the Director for Government and Public Services Industry Leader. He's got over 20 years public sector working experience and has been in consulting for the past 13 years. And he's currently the Government and Public Services Industry Leader at Deloitte Africa, focusing on innovative solutions for the public sector, especially at the provincial sphere of government, for maximum service delivery, clean governance, and accountability. Let me pause right there, Ntate Tabane, to give you the opportunity to tell us a bit of a background to this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Bratim, and welcome to everybody. Also, good morning to our panelists. What we are discussing today is the outcome of a Deloitte global process through what we call our government insights team that came up with Government Trends 2021 report. This report looks at the most transformational trends in government in the year 2021-2022. Around May of this year, we'll be releasing another Government Trends Report 2022. So right now, we are in the process of finalizing our communication to our stakeholders on the 2021 Government Trends Report. This is a report that came out with 9 trends, which are said to be the most transformational trends in various governments across the globe in 2021. There are 9 of these trends that have been identified. Out of these 9, we in South Africa selected the 5 that are most impactful to the South African government and to the various social partners working along with the government. And I'm going to list them quickly and also identify out of those the ones that we chose. The first was the accelerated digital government, which showed how a COVID-19 pandemic brought a new generation of digitization in government. And many governments had to pick that up very quickly in order to continue with the usual business of government. The second one was seamless service delivery, which we are discussing today. It deals with personalized, frictionless, and anticipatory services in government. Along with that, we are today also talking about sustaining public trust in government, right? Which is the third trend that was identified by our global team. And of course, that deals with strengthening trust in government institutions, as well as its systems and processes. The fourth one identified was location liberation, dealing with adaptive workplaces in government, essentially talking about the future of work from a government perspective. Fluid data dynamics, which deals with generating greater public value from the data collected, is yet another trend that was identified. The sixth one, government as a cognitive system, dealing with using hindsight, real-time data, and foresight to drive policy and decision-making within government. Agile government, dealing with building greater flexibility and adaptability in the public sector. as well as the role of cybersecurity in government. Now, of these 9 trends, of course, the ninth is inclusive and equity-centered government, where government embeds greater inclusion, diversity, and equity in the public sector, ensuring that equity is achieved in that sense. So out of these 9, we chose 5. As I said, the 2 that we are dealing with today is sustaining public trust in government and seamless service delivery. We have already dealt with accelerating digital government as well as location liberation. So those are what we have chosen along with government's broader role in cyber. So digital government, government's role in cyber, location liberation or the future of work, seamless service delivery, and sustaining public trust in government are the 5 that we have chosen. And Pratim and the panelists today, let us engage on the 2 that I've identified, sustaining public trust in government. Thank you very much, Pratim. That is the short background.
Thank you, Khabatabane, there for your presentation and the background that you gave us regarding this webinar this morning. And Dr. George Tsisani is Director Strategy and Business Design with Deloitte Africa View. George is a director in the public sector practice with over 19 years consulting experience. And his specific experience spans various industries, including the public sector, manufacturing, mining, power, and automotive industry. He has also consulted on key issues in the power sector, including security of supply, restructuring of the sector, and technology adoption. The right person to expand more on what Dr. Tabane said earlier on. George?
Thank you, Tim. Good morning, everyone. So, as Haba said, today's topic is public trust, sustaining public trust, and seamless service delivery. So I'm going to be discussing seamless service delivery, right? And I think it's good to start from scratch, which is defining what seamless service delivery is. Well, it is characterized by three things. It is personalized, it is frictionless, and it is anticipatory. Now, let's explore each one of these elements, right? Personalized means that the service is tailored to the individual's needs, their interests, and circumstances. In other words, it is not the one-size-fits-all approach. Frictionless means that accessing the service requires little to no effort on the part of the customer, right? In other words, there are no frustrating barriers or red tape. Anticipatory means that the provider actually anticipates what you want next and offers it proactively. Now, we see this a lot with streaming services. Now, when you think about the concept of seamless service delivery, I mean, it seems impossible, right? But it's actually not. And there are some governments that have been making huge strides in this area. And just 2 examples of this. I mean, in 1995, Belgium actually ran a pilot project where they looked at pre-filling tax returns, right? Where most of the information is pre-populated. Now, at the time, this was a niche project, but now more and more government agencies are adopting similar approaches to improving customer experience. The second example is from the city of Stockholm, where in 2019, they introduced a mobility as a service pilot project where users can connect to public transport, bike rental, car share, and taxi services through a single smartphone app. So citizens can seamlessly access multiple transportation options and actually pay only one bill. Now, what does it take to achieve the vision of seamless service delivery? Again, 3 things are important. The first one is committing to fully digital services, right? This means rethinking every aspect of public services by not only redesigning back-end processes, but the whole concept of how services are delivered. Now, as Haba earlier alluded, fortunately, the COVID-19 pandemic has helped to accelerate the need for what we call touchless services, right? And there are many examples of this. Whether it's medical practitioners doing virtual consultations, or in our world of professional services, delivering client projects virtually. Now, these are things that we didn't think were possible not so long ago. The second thing that's important is designing proactive services around life events. What is a life event? Childbirth is such an example of a life event that could trigger multiple types of services. Now, a life event trigger does two important things. Firstly, it starts service delivery without the citizen necessarily needing to be involved. And secondly, it starts multiple types of services arising from a single example. Now, by way of an example, in 2019, Estonia developed an automated IT system that fetches childbirth data from the population's registry each night, right? And parents who are eligible for family benefits are sent a prompt, and confirmation takes less than a minute, and then funds are transferred to the family's bank account. Now, this automatic trigger model can be applied to numerous other events, right? Whether it's a job loss, retirement, injury or illness, or even death. But as you can imagine, right, this is only possible through data sharing mechanisms, which brings us to the next point, which is it is a requirement to build infrastructure to support seamless services, right? Firstly, the data part of it, the data needs to be in a format that is compatible with AI technologies to be able to anticipate service needs. And the concept of a digital identity also becomes important. Now, digital ID is a unique uniform ID that grants agencies access to data about a citizen. The analogy I can make here is similar to a fingerprint, right? That's unique to each one of us. I've mentioned data sharing previously in order to enable frictionless and streamlined public services. And then, of course, adopting intelligent technologies such as AI. So in summary and in conclusion, seamless service delivery requires the following 6 things. Number 1, a shift from government-centric to citizen-centric. In other words, putting the citizen at the center and moving away from government silos. And I think we all have experience of how government departments are designed and how they look at only what they do, and sometimes communication across departments becomes a challenge. Secondly, redesigning service delivery processes and workflows to integrate emerging technologies such as AI. Number 3, investing in digital experience plus platforms, right, such as apps. Number 4, driving the adoption of digital identity in order to provide personalized service delivery. Number 5, adopting integrated data management systems to promote the once only principle. Now, the once only principle basically says that either business or citizen provides information just once, but that information is used in multiple scenarios in order to gain access to multiple services, right? And then lastly, and perhaps more importantly, bringing about a cultural shift by embedding a customer-first mindset in the public sector. And in my view, this may well necessitate relooking at the skill set of the workforce. So Tim, thank you. I will pause there and hand over back to you.
No, thanks very much, Dr. Sasani. Thanks for your presentation. Now, let's look in the practical world, the actual environments. What happened there? And I'll start with the National Department of Basic Education, Dr. Siliki Tlhabane. Let's hear from you, because the challenge of COVID-19 was probably more pronounced in your environment than anywhere else. And Mfanelo Ntsobi, I would like to hear your comments from the Gauteng province's point of view regarding the education sector. And of course, Yanni, you'll share with us the experience in the health sector, in the health environment. Now, we're talking about millions of learners here who were affected by the COVID-19 lockdown, and teachers had to quickly adapt, and getting technology to work, people to work with and using technology is another challenge. But broadly speaking, and Dr. Tlhabane, how did you respond as the Department of Basic Education? Oh, before you respond, let me just quickly give you your stripes first. Siliki Tlhabane is the Chief Director, Maths, Science, Technology and Curriculum Enhancement Programs, Department of Basic Education. And he has worked in government, NGO, business environment, different positions of leadership. And from 1993 to date, has worked at middle, senior and executive management levels in different parts of the government and the NGO and business sectors. As I said, he's responsible for mathematics, science, technology education, and for the ICTs in the education department, in the Department of Basic Education. Let's go for it, Dr. Tlhabane.
Thank you very much, Tim, and let me also greet my fellow panelists and the webinars who are in this exciting platform. Tim, like you correctly said, education is one service or one product or one sector where every citizen is a stakeholder. It's either you are a student, or you are a parent who has a child, or you're an uncle or a aunt who has a child in school. So education affects everybody, the entire society. And COVID spared nobody, because everybody was really interested in knowing how education was going to respond to the impact of COVID. One thing that the nation knows very well is that COVID led to school closures, interrupting service delivery. And for us, service or continued service delivery or seamless government service delivery from basic education point of view means uninterrupted schooling. It means children coming to school, receiving lessons, and teachers coming to school doing their job, and parents bringing their children to school for children to continue with their learning. But we all know that due to the regulations that were placed on all of us, and the infrastructure challenges that we had, some of the protocols compelled us to adopt new ways of delivering education, including adopting what you call rotational school attendance or rotational school timetabling, if we had to comply with the 1.5 meter social distancing. But from technological point of view, so that I don't drift much into the other broader aspect of education, like you correctly say, we had to adapt quickly. Technology that we never knew that existed, that we never knew that could assist us to deliver education, was all of a sudden available to us. And teachers and learners and parents had to adapt to ensure that we take advantage of the technology that was made available to ensure education continuity. And we had to adopt what we call the remote learning strategies. That also includes the use of technology. And the use of technology included using what you call low-end technology, middle-end technology, and high-end technology. The low-end technology would be technology that is available like radio and television, which we used, and we worked with local radio stations, including community radio stations, to deliver lessons to children who were at home. And we identified some of our top teachers to ensure education continuity. Television as well is one other technology that has potential for massification, because the majority of households have some kind of a television. But that is not the only type of technology that we used. We had other middle-end technologies like the use of WhatsApps, small byte content that we then delivered to learners. And we also had high-end technologies that required high-speed broadband connectivity, where we even had virtual classrooms and we delivered lessons, identified good teachers, and for those communities that could afford. So we adopted a multi-pronged approach in the use of technology in ensuring that we drive the business of education while learners were adopting this rotational timetable. You would understand that when the minister decided in consultation with cabinet to bring all the primary school children back sometime last year, there was an uproar in society that the minister wants to kill the children. But the decisions of the minister were informed by scientific data and scientific evidence. These were well calculated decisions, and consulting with the bodies that advise the minister, and putting this before cabinet for cabinet to approve. Why? Because we have always held the belief that says we are stronger in the classroom, and technology, due to its cost, it is not every child or every parent who can afford it. So we had to come up with strategies that would bring children back. We are happy that finally the cabinet has approved that all children should come back to school to ensure continued government service delivery, which we do best inside of the classroom. But technology is already here, and we are not going to drop all the gains that we have made. We have increased our investment in technology and will continue to do that. And thank you very much for the opportunity that you have given us. And we want to thank business, because business came to the party. We worked with those who have who are digital content creators. They donated this content to us for free, and we were able to broadcast it through all national and provincial educational portals, through the apps that we had developed, and through our virtual classroom approaches. But we want to thank the mobile network operators for zero rating this content so that children and teachers could access it at no cost whatsoever. Without the support of business, we would have not been able to do what we did. Yes, we have experienced huge curriculum losses, and it's going to take us some time to recover all the content losses. But we are very confident that in a few years' time, we will be able to get back to where we are supposed to be. It will not be easy. We need the entire society to hold hands with us for us to be able to recover the losses. Children have progressed to the next grade, and they have missed out on critical lessons from the previous grades. We see technology as being one of the mechanisms that is going to assist us and support our efforts to recover the curriculum losses. Thank you very much, Tim.
Dr. Tlhabane, thank you very much. So let me call on Dr. Mfanelo Nzobi, the Acting Deputy Director General Education Support, Gauteng Department of Education. You cater to probably 25% of the education community in South Africa. Dr. Nzobi, I would like to hear from you what the practical challenges were when you had to quickly move to enriching or enhancing the delivery of content, the registration. I know that in Gauteng you've been working on these things for some time, and we've heard words about being customer-centric, the personalized services, frictionless, and access, and all of those things. But what happened in Gauteng? How practically did you implement your plans?
Good morning, Pratim, fellow panelists and webinars. Now, I must say, if I get into it, I'm also looking at the topic on sustaining public trust in government. I don't think we've said much about public trust because trust is earned, and I want to believe that with trust, you get the support, which will earn you the legitimacy. So during this period, all we needed was leadership at the level of the government, but also in the sector. As Gauteng provincial government, you would appreciate that around 2014, we embarked on a transformation to introduce technology in the classroom, to bring about excitement, but also to improve educational outcomes. And the pillars of that strategy was to provide the school with connectivity, to ensure that we distribute devices in classrooms. We install LED boards, prioritizing township schools, of course, and I will explain why. But also bringing technology as a game changer with these devices preloaded. But at the anchor of this solution was teacher development, training of educators, because many educators would not have been exposed to technology in one way or the other during their training. We needed to do that, but also improving these classrooms in a way by renovating the classrooms. You'd appreciate that many of these classrooms, especially in township schools, the infrastructure was dilapidated. So we've had to come in. It was a mammoth task, but fast forward, COVID also humbled us, with so much investment as Gauteng provincial government, ensuring that we convert over 604 schools, and that benefited over 10,000 classrooms across the province, with about 16,000 educators being trained, starting with grade 12 going down, but some schools were declared full ICT schools. Full ICT schools are schools that benefited on this solution from grade 7 to grade 12. What happened during COVID? As fate would have it, during COVID, nobody knew about COVID. All we wanted was leadership. And our only response then was to also use the technology that government invested in. But we got to also realize that even Gauteng was not as ready, because our solution was classroom-based. What about learners who were sitting at home? Learners who did not have access to smart devices? We've just had to be innovative. But the good thing is this happened at the time when we had just launched our content platform. We opened the content platform to all the learners, even those learners, Mr. Chabani will attest, who are outside Gauteng had access to this content, static and interactive content, freely available content. But I must also thank some of the telcos who zero-rated education content even ahead of COVID. But some of the innovations that the Gauteng government has to bring in was also the broadcasting solution, reaching those learners that had no access to these devices. But of late, we also developed our own multimedia broadcasting studio, where we would bring the best educators, and these educators would broadcast to the rest of the learners across the province. But I must say, it was not as easy as people would have anticipated because of the progress that we would have made as Gauteng. And the lesson to us is that we must remain innovative. And the pillars that we have adopted also include innovation and research, which makes us ahead most of the time, including the solution that we have adopted as the provincial government. So in essence, to promote seamless service delivery, we just had to ensure that we now introduce and fast-track technology to enhance teaching and learning, even though in some schools we still had challenges on adoption, integration, as well as utilization, because some of the learners, because we also provided additional data so that learners can contact educators, can interact with educators in the community of practice. So we also realized that we needed to tighten security because they would gain access to undesirable material. and which was not contributing positively to teaching and learning. Perhaps let me leave it there. Thanks, Tim.
All right, I'll be coming back to the quality of the content that was delivered and whether the performance of the schools, the teachers, the learners improved as a result of the introduction of this of these new technologies. But let's take a look at the health sector, and we go to the Northwest for that. Yanni de Beer is the Chief Director, Strategy and Systems, Northwest Department of Health, and he's currently employed as the Chief Director for Strategy and Systems in the Department of Health. And he's responsible for research, monitoring, evaluation, health information management, and has been in the public service for more than 33 years and with the Department of Health for 14 years. Now, Yanni, welcome. Tell me, in the context of health services delivery, what did you do that was very innovative in the context of the Northwest that we can learn from?
Thank you, Tim, and thank you to the panel members and other attendees to this webinar. Yes, indeed, you had to think fast, and when COVID came, we didn't have a lot of time to implement new initiatives in the beginning. Fortunately, during the lockdown period, we did have some time to prepare ourselves as a department for COVID. Obviously, as a province, Northwest is a very rural province, so we do have technology issues that we have to deal with, seeing that not all of our facilities are able to have access to network and ICT. But those are the challenges that we sit with as a department and as a province that we are trying to deal with. We've been able to get to the stage where we can give access to facilities in terms of routers, so that they can access the internet, capture data, and so on. So, in terms of innovation, in terms of ICT for the province, as indicated, we were also competing with bigger provinces in getting ICT equipment to the province to deal with COVID. So you will understand that during the lockdowns, it was a struggle to get access to equipment and so on, access to networks. But as a province, we did manage to make sure that we do have access and we do provide services to our citizens in the province. Obviously, our first priority was trying to deal with COVID and treating patients and getting access to the relevant equipment in terms of medical equipment and then also ICT equipment. So I believe that, the issue that we need to look at and address is that whether we are able to, or were we ready in terms of the fourth industrial revolution, in terms of getting our 4IR up and making sure that we can continue with our services even in stages where we are in a pandemic. But I think as a province we did well. Obviously, you learn a lot of lessons, and there still needs to be a lot of improvement in going forward, in making sure that you, when you develop or want to use artificial intelligence or ICT systems, that you have that seamless service delivery still continue, even though you are not able to have access to patients all the time or render services continuously, but that you process and continue with rendering services at your facilities. Obviously, health is a face-to-face business where you treat patients, but on the back end you also have your support staff where you still have to make sure that you have medicines and equipment and other surgicals available to treat your patients. So obviously those things don't stop, and during this whole period we have continued to work, and I think we were able to come out tops in terms of making sure that we are able to treat the citizens in the province. Thank you, Tim.
Thanks, Yanni. Let me go back to Seliki Tlhabane and Mfanelo Nzobi for your comments on this question. I mean, it's one thing to introduce technology, adopt new technologies, train the teachers, deliver the content, and get the devices, smartphones, into the hands of the learners so that they can access this particular content. But from your point of view, even if it's anecdotal, did it in any way improve the quality of learning amongst the learners, and of course, improve the efficiency on the part of the teachers to deliver the content?
Tim, if I may start. In education, it is extremely difficult to point at one intervention and say this intervention is the one that has brought about the desired change. But we can confidently say the learning outcomes and the results, as we measure them through national assessments like the grade 12 performance, has matched what we have done in the past. And we believe that it is a combination of strategies, including the use of ICTs, training of teachers, deployment of technology, working with broadcast partners, including those broadcast solutions that have been developed by the provinces, and pushing and distributing content through various means, including the preloaded content that comes on the devices that were given to learners. We believe that this has contributed, and that without this brave approach, we would have not been at the point where we could report to the nation and say the class of 2021 has actually matched the performance of the previous cohorts. You would understand that the cohort of 2021 were exposed to 2 years of COVID. When they were in grade 11, they did not attend school full-time. They were attending on a rotational basis. And we had to come up with brave approaches led by our politicians and our administrators to ensure that we support learners with any and every approach that we have. So I can say, yes, technology has contributed, but can we attribute the entire positive outcome to technology? Definitely no. There are many other things that we did. And with the grade 12s returning on a full-time basis, teachers taking care of them inside of the classrooms, attending on a daily basis when they're in grade 12, putting them into learner camps and all those things. All these strategies collectively assisted to ensure that the learning outcome improve. So the answer to the question is not an easy one, Tim, but we can confirm that the only assessment that we have at national level, which is the grade 12 examination, proved that learners were taken care of, and they were taken care of including through the use of technology. And without it, we suspect we would have not achieved what we achieved. Thank you very much, Tim.
Yeah.
My colleague, Dr. Nzobi, may add to the input I made.
No, I'm glad, Pratim, that Mr. Tlhabane emphasizes this point that it's not only one intervention, and he speaks from experience as an educationist himself. So I lack depth when it comes to that. But one thing that I can state, Pratim, is that whereas we had wanted to introduce ICT and technology as a game changer, COVID taught us that even the same notion of a classroom may have to change. You know, the notion of a classroom being brick and mortar with so much demand for learning spaces will have to change. But secondly, parents have many options now. I mean, there's demand for online learning, there's demand for virtual learning. Hence, Gauteng has had to reposition its solution. And the solution had to be repurposed from classroom focus to also catering for virtual learning and connecting with learners, even if they are not at school. Of course, data still becomes, a cost driver. That's where most of these telcos must come in, so that we find a solution to cheaper data. Because for the education sector, there is no way that they will afford any disruption any disruption in teaching and learning impacts negatively on the future of learners. It also impacts negatively on the future of the nation. Thank you.
All right, I would like the attendees to also share their thoughts and questions with us. If you want to comment on what has been discussed up to this point, let's hear from you if you're attending this webinar. Raise your questions or share your thoughts with us. So how do you rate government's performance in terms of the introduction of technology to deliver services, particularly education and health care? Now, there are sometimes constraints in how far you can go in delivering services, especially within the public setup, for the simple reason that the public procurement system sometimes can be very complicated. I mean, if you have to source the equipment that you were talking about, the technologies that you were talking about, you've got to go through PFMA, you've got to do this, do that. But what we experienced this past 2 years was not going to wait for anybody. When children have to learn, education and relevant content must be delivered. It does not wait for the procurement system to improve. Did you encounter such challenges? And if any, what did you learn from that? Or before you go, yeah, how about you come in and comment?
Yeah, Bratim, I thought let me touch on a couple of pointers related to sustaining public trust in government, which Dr. Nzobi accurately indicated that, it's a point we needed to, emphasize a little bit more. So the whole issue about sustaining public trust in government is that it must first be earned by the government from the people, right? So there is a need to increase the social capital between the citizens and the government. Now, there is a phrase that says, that's called rallying behind the flag in times of crisis. Now, the COVID-19 pandemic has shown us that globally, trust soared in government by the citizens because of the steps that governments across the world had taken to, inform and ensure that people are safe when the COVID pandemic broke out. And unfortunately, as it goes, trust only gets thrown up for so long and then it drops again very quickly. And we saw that trust deficit happen in South Africa. For a short while, there was a lot of trust in the interventions that government did early in 2020, but things very, very quickly went south because of corruption in government as far as the PPE procurement was concerned. So even globally, there was an 8% decrease in trust, at least by January 2021, due to the incompetence of government as well as ill intent on the side of many governments. So whatever the rallying behind the flag in times of crisis, there are always these issues in various geographies which actually fracture trust in government even further. Inequality, polarization politically, as well as lack of credible information disseminated by government. In our situation, in order to have an economic revival within government, we have to make sure that we keep the trust competent, the trust issue as a key component of such a revival. So our economic reconstruction and recovery plan will not see the light of day unless government is trusted by the citizens. So there are three key elements that we need to look at as far as trust in government is concerned. One of them is whether government is able to develop trusted digital systems, services, and data, where they digitize services, as Brajot said, especially on the aftermath of this pandemic. Is government able to safeguard personal data of its citizens? At least in South Africa, we have the Protection of Private Information Act, which is a good legislative intervention to that regard. But we have seen a pushback in the tracing, the contact tracing of people during the higher levels of COVID-19 in the country. People pushed back because of no trust in these digital services and the safeguard of their own information. Citizens must be allowed to take better control of revoking their personal data. Okay, India has come up with a plan, for example, where instead of your ID, you can generate a random 16-number digit that is activated biometrically, either by your iris or your fingerprint, right? So that even if somebody may have access to your ID number, the government digital system has alternative ways of ensuring that your private data is secured. The second thing is, tackling the issue around information manipulation, misinformation, and disinformation. It is very difficult nowadays to distinguish between fake news and what is correct. So, government has to take a concerted efforts in ensuring that it collaborates with social media platforms, it does public awareness, and improve its own transparency in terms of the data shared. Because where there is misinformation, as we have seen, for example, at the storming of the Capitol in the US, it was all based on misinformation, which resulted into vandalism and violence. Same thing happened around June of last year in South Africa, just on the back of the incarceration of former President Zuma. So tackling this information information manipulation is a key issue. Finally, the issue that saw us, and this is a case in point, trust in government, so a government-led effectiveness in COVID-19 response. If there was no trust, we wouldn't have seen the sort of leadership that government had provided. So many governments fight conspiracies very quickly and head on. They implement education and toolkits that permeates all of society, including learners in classrooms, on how to distinguish between fake news and that which is not fake. Of course, transparency in information and information sharing. At least in South Africa, we saw the National Coronavirus Command Council periodically being transparent in sharing information with citizens, and that on its own created better trust as far as the COVID-19 case in point is concerned. Now, where to and what needs to be done? There are 5 things, Tim and panelists as well as webinars, on what we believe can sustain public trust in government. The first thing is for government to focus on what we call the trust science. 1, the government has to be humane, reliable, it has to be capable, as well as transparent. So humanity, transparency, capability, and reliability are the 4 trust signals that government always needs to make sure that it is at the top of its agenda. Secondly, government must expand avenues for public participation by citizens, okay, so that there is always that key interaction between the citizens and the government. The third thing is to employ non-traditional information sharing avenues, okay? So not only the news, 7 o'clock news are a way of communicating. There are new technologies that can be used to combat misinformation. And of course, finally, establish a robust data governance in the collection, storage, and use of personal data. And this is what government needs to be focusing on in order to improve and sustain trust by the public in itself. Thank you, Tim.
No, much appreciated. Thank you very much. And let me go back. I'm not sure, Dr. Tsani, if you want to wade in there and also talk about potential risks that you see. I mean, it's one thing, I go back to the earlier question, to introduce technology and start certain processes, but those need to be sustained. And I think everybody here on the panel understands that if you're not going to maintain the system and innovate as you progress, that the whole thing may collapse and backfire on you. Because on one hand, you raise expectations that this is where we're going now, but technology-wise, that is, but you have to sustain that. Any particular risks that you see?
Yeah, so thanks, Tim. So two things I want to point out here, and I want to start with your question around the the PFMA and procuring some of these technology requirements. So my first response would be that if you look at the PFMA, for instance, that it makes provision for emergency procurement. Now, and we saw that with what was happening with PPE, if you like, scandal, because a lot of those equipment were procured through the emergency procurement route, right? So there is that provision, but of course it needs to be emergency. There's like you need to go through the process of justification and all of that. So there is that. And I think related to that point, I want to link that to what Hava has said now on public trust. Unfortunately, what has happened is that whole saga just proved, what Hava was saying around public trust, because in as much as you were, there was good intent because of the emergency nature of the pandemic and how you needed to respond with agility, but how the thing unfolded actually just went about in reducing public trust. And you can see how these things are interrelated, right? So I think the risk is really there, is how do you make sure that even though you, as I say, the emergency procurement is there in the statutes and there's provisions for that, but making sure that even the correct procedures and processes are followed in order to achieve the right outcome. The second thing I want to say is that, and I made the point earlier around seamless service delivery. For me, right, we can talk about systems, processes, and all of these things. I do think that one of the biggest shifts, and therefore the risk, is if there is no a big mind shift or a cultural shift, particularly on the part of government, both in terms of politicians, but also our administrators, in understanding how you put the customer at the center of everything you do, right? Firstly, but secondly, you do an assessment of actually what will it take to make the shift, right? Not only culturally, but also in how we implement these things. I mean, your point about maintaining, it's one thing to procure the technology, but it's a different thing to be able to maintain it so that it becomes sustainable. So I think that is something that we have not grappled with, right? And it's, in my view, it's one of the biggest risks, because the same thinking that brought us here is not the thinking that's going to get us forward and to actually make a big leap as a country. So for me, that's one of the biggest risks brought in.
All right, thanks very much and for that, George. Yanni, what is your view in the health environment and also a rural province or setting like yours in the Northwest? What are the next steps to sustain the seamless service delivery and, of course, the important thing, to improve public trust, given the lessons that we learned this past year around the PPE procurement saga, for instance? I mean, we started with people believing in the government, supporting and following the leadership of the government, and by the end of it all, that specifically in the health department was lost, and in time the system got discredited.
Thank you, Tim. Indeed, I think one must learn from this experience that we had during COVID to make sure that we earn public trust and that there's openness and transparency in the way we do things. We've all heard about the SIU reports in terms of the PPE issues. I think the way we want to make sure that we use this opportunity to, when we go out on tenders for this nature, that we are open and transparent, and we have the trust of the citizens to show that when we procure this type of medical equipment or PPE, that we follow due process and follow the acts and regulations that are in place in order to sustain the trust and the equipment and the ICT going forward. It's something that we need to make sure that we give the necessary attention to ICT, and that ICT does not become at the back end of service delivery, but we must make sure that we embrace ICT as we move forward. We are moving in the right direction, and that we make sure that we develop it in such a way that it can lead to seamless service delivery for everybody, all our citizens, that you don't have to, if, for example, if a baby is born, that you can do the registration at the facility, you get the birth certificate at the facility. You don't have to go to Home Affairs again so that they have an office with inside, or the process can be done through at the hospital level. So I think we must learn from this experience and make sure that we improve going forward. Thank you, Tim.
Thanks very much. And Panelo Nsobi, let me hear from you. And before I give the opportunity to make concluding remarks to Seleki Tlhabane, Kgabatabane, and George Tsesane, where to from here? Expectations have been raised, and we expect more.
In the education sector, our objective reality is that education also remains the microcosm of society, and our social environment has changed. The notion of work has changed. Look at us now. We would be sitting in a studio. We are now connecting without necessarily having to move. So is education. We can't be using 20th century methods to engage learners in the 21st century. And for that matter, most of these learners are quite advanced with these devices. They are using these devices. Their social world has changed. So why do we want to frustrate them when they get to school? But secondly, it is also important, when somebody speaks about COVID and you see these PPE scandals, I get very emotional because, I survived COVID 3 times. And we relied on political leadership. We relied on sectoral leadership. If we did not have such brave leadership, because there were some calls that we should close the sector. We should not go to school. Let's wait and see what happens. But because we had a decisive leadership, we had proactive leadership, we saved the learners. And in that, we also saved the learning gains. So it is quite important that we also manage to strike this balance, what some would refer to as balance between livelihoods.
Sure. Well, Seleki Tlhabane, brief comments from you.
Having to balance between livelihoods as well as ensuring that we keep the sector going, and at the same time saving the academic year as would have it. It's 2 years, not even 1 year. And for those learners that were affected, either infected or those that were persuaded by parents or other influences to leave the system, it's going to take time to regain those learning deficits. Thanks so much.
Seleki Tlhabane.
Thank you once more, Tim. Tim, the issue of trust, like Kgabatabane indicated, takes time and requires transparency. When
we brought children back for the first time. There are parents who did not trust that their children were going to be safe, and that they actually kept them at home, and they did not return. When the brave leadership of the basic education sector called children to come back. It is something that is understood that parents had to ensure that their children are safe before they could return them. And last year, we saw parents return their children in huge numbers, including those that actually were declared to have dropped out. So it shows that parents waited and saw whether it was safe for their children to come back. And once they saw that it was actually safe, then they allowed their children to come back. Before joining this webinar this morning, I started in a meeting with over 200 officials in Mpumalanga province. The HOD, the senior management responsible for curriculum, district director, circuit managers, including school principals, in a meeting, in a platform that was not there before COVID came. And like Dr. Nsobi said, that the world has changed. I was in Mpumalanga virtually this morning. Now I am in this webinar. After this webinar, I may be in Western Cape. And from there, I can move to KZN, seated in a boardroom or in one space. And this has already completely changed how we do our business. And that it is going to happen, and it is answering where to from now. Okay. We can't go back. We need to proceed and move forward, and technology has changed how we do business, both administratively and how we deliver education in the country. So we are excited about this. The frustrations of procurement, as we indicated. Listen, it's important that we need to comply with national treasury regulations. We cannot use COVID to flout frozen procedures, but we need to find ways of moving speedily, especially if those procedures are dragging delivery of critical services and goods like technology and so forth. But we need to be very careful of those people who are going to take advantage of COVID and come up with other ideas of practicing some corrupt practicing in the name of doing good. It's very, very important that we need to do create that balance, like my colleague Dr. Nsobi indicated, that let us not hold on to policies that are delaying us, but at the same time, let us be vigilant to those who will take advantage of any gap that will be created. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much. And George Tisani, brief comments from you, and Khabatamane, I'll be coming to you for the concluding remarks. Thank you.
Thanks, Martin. So I'm going to keep it short and simple. So, you know, we are talking now about the fourth industrial revolution. Now, the first three missed us, right? Passed us by. I think it is time for us to fully participate in the fourth industrial revolution, and all of these things that we were talking about, you know, technologies and seamless delivery, all of those things are a part of the time we're living in. And my view is that we have the skills, we have the capability to move this country forward. But it will take the political will to take us there, but also to those, the best of the best among us, to be leading this process. And so, yeah, so it is possible, and we look at how other countries have done it. It's a concerted effort by all the stakeholders, and we are not, we don't have a shortage of anything. So I'm optimistic, but I do think that the political leadership and the political will, from a country's perspective, is what's important to move us forward. Thank you.
Khabatamane.
Thank you, Bratim. My concluding remarks would be that for government to achieve a seamless service delivery, there are many, particularly digital interventions that are required in order to meet the challenges of the day. I think Dr. Nzubi, for me, hit the nail on the head in saying 21st century problems or challenges cannot be met by 20th century solutions. We need to be at the cutting edge of the technological advances in order to provide this seamless service delivery, where the government talks to government, the left hand knows what the right hand is doing, but also in the same breath, government is able to interact with citizens in a manner that is very convenient for citizens and agile, so that services are able to reach citizens very, very quickly. Now, all of these advances will fall flat on their face if the public does not trust the government. So the issue about increasing the social capital and decreasing the trust deficit between the citizens and government is a very, very critical element towards ensuring that all these things are achieved. And I am very glad that today we're able to look at these from two angles, from the public healthcare angle at the provincial level and from the basic education level at both the provincial and the national government level. At least we know that there are easier ways, more technologically advanced interventions to provide public healthcare services, even at the provincial level, and there are new ways and the technologically advanced ways to still ensure that teaching and learning happens in a different environment, in an agile environment, without necessarily having to be in contact, but also improving the way in which the services are delivered to the citizens. Thank you very much, Tim, and thank you to the panelists and the webinars.
No, thanks very much for this discussion this morning. Obviously, in situations like the one that we were discussing now, for seamless service delivery, sustaining public trust with technology at the center of it all, is what lessons have we learned? It's one thing to implement and do this and the other, but are you improving the game as you continue to deliver the services? I think that's the key takeaway, the key thing to think about, and of course to sustain it into the future. Much appreciated to the panelists and also those who attended this webinar. Appreciate, and thanks to Deloitte as well as from us here at BizNews. Thanks to my colleagues for helping put this together. Have a great day.
Thank you, Bratim. Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you, Bratim.
Thank you.